Welcome everyone at the very first PhD students conference, which opens, I hope, tradition of PhD students conferences of a bright new study program, Digital Culture and Creative Industries. Today, our PhD candidate will present in 20 minutes their research projects. We hope that these presentations will meet the right audience. The conference is public, but we would like to present the 1 year work to our doctoral board, and also to discuss together with students and supervisors what we have done during the year on the project and what are the perspectives where we can evolve these projects.
Okay, you should be able to see now. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. And first of all, let me thank you for coming and joining this meeting this early in the morning. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Svatava Doubková, and I'm a PhD student here at Masaryk University in Brno. What I'd like to present today is my PhD project proposal. As you can see on the screen, the topic is archives of video art, mediation of the personal and collective memory through new incarnations. So the purpose of this presentation today is to give you a brief idea about that during those 20 upcoming minutes. Maybe at this point, it's good to give you some brief annotation what this project is going to be about. It's just a short one. So the project deals, or this project of dissertation deals with the issue of archiving the art of new media with focus on video art. And it considers the long-term preservation of these works and the adequate accessible presentation of these works be problematic in problematic situation. The aim is therefore to research a comprehensive understanding of the issue based on the current state. The project works with individual and collective memory, shaping collective history, and as a result, social behavior and attitudes. The work deals also with the design, configuration, and architecture of platforms for presentation of works, of such works, with a focus on video art as well. In space, time, and the presentation of to society in an accessible and meaningful way. So now I'll tell you how I organized this this presentation. Yeah, I divided my presentation into about nine slides in total. And it shouldn't take longer than 20 minutes. And I have organized it in the following way. Firstly, I already started with introduction, so that's behind us already. Now we have what we see now, it's the overview of this presentation. Then I'll move on to the problems of this field. And afterwards, there's objectives, aims of my work. And then I move on to the methods that I'm going to use, for this project. After that, I'll just want to show you or give you some idea what I would like to realize practically, because I don't want to be focused purely just on the text outcomes of my work, but I would also very much like to present something tangible or some like application of my findings of the work. And then I'll follow with about 2 slides of references to books that I find very relevant to this topic. And then there will be some space for your questions. And then it should be over. So the problems, let's move to the problems. This is based mainly, or I got this idea how to put this. It's based on a book from Reinhardt and Ippolito, which is called Recollection Art, New Media and Social Memory, which was published back in 2014 in Cambridge. And they found within this book, they identified 3 main threats to creativity in general in 21st century. Those 3 threats that they identified were technology, institutions, and law. Here you can see actually 5 threats. I added 2 of them, sustainability and authenticity, because I found these within other texts and other books. So I kind of broadened this slide, which is actually also planned for my initial stage of this project, which is coming up with some SWOT analysis, which those letters stand for strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and the threats. And this kind of analysis is used mainly or usually within the business environment, but I think it's really applicable within basically all fields. And it gives you a really nice overview of the situation within the field and its environment as well. Yeah, and those 3 main ones, those threats that they identified, technology, as many works are so much dependent on technologies and the rapid development, which becomes really like this problem even speeds up over time. So it's really one of the main ones. Then the second one I mentioned, those institutions that, yeah, those works relied on institutions and the support from them as well. And the law, which is kind of disruptive or complicates the situation in general in terms of access to the works, and it puts restrictions on intellectual property, such as copyright, licensing, and so on. Other very interesting moment when I was reading this publication was that they speak about this vulnerability of new media art or video art as a symptom of a crisis of social memory in general, actually, which was a very interesting moment for me, at least, that it's a symptom of deeper crisis within the society and its memory. Because, yeah, it's really hard to preserve those pieces of art for future generations. And I recently heard actually this experiment when people bury those very basic mugs from IKEA to make like a future artifact. What would future archaeologists actually find? Like what was important for our society? And this was a very interesting idea to me, that an IKEA mug thanks to the worldwide production, would be actually perceived as something super important for our society, even though it's just object of everyday life, which is, yeah, there's no special property. It's just a ordinary mug. Yeah, and this led me to creating this SWOT analysis. And I think that could be a really useful overview for other researchers and workers in this field. And now I think I mentioned everything what I wanted regarding this slide. And we can move on to another one, which is the objectives. Besides those that you can see on the screen, I'm like, what strategies are the most suitable in the case of video art? What solutions prove to be sustainable and effective in the long run? How does methodology of selection of works for preservation work? All these are like the main ones. I try to come up with some other ones which are a bit more focused. These are just the general ideas. And it should be, yeah, among those other like sub objectives, I have here questions of composing collective memory identity through archives, which kind of relates to that example with the IKEA mug, like a future artifact that represents our society, our times. Then the role of active participation in archives. That's something that I'm really interested in, because in that way, I feel like those narratives that would be otherwise suppressed can get the room to actually be involved in those archives, and it gives archives a broader perspective of the contemporary life, or life at some, or a state of society at a certain time. So I find this like a very important point, to have this option to participate in archives. And then the role of artists and the interventions to contact with archives. That was also a moment that I found very interesting during my past year studies, as artists can highlight certain moments of the archive or certain artifacts in the archive and shed light on them and help society to see, or maybe even solve some social issues, and give like better idea of stuff, or help to see it from different perspective and help to understand that. So basically my idea, my objectives is to bring archives to society, so the society can actually use them in a meaningful way and work with them, not just see them as something dusty in a dark room, but bring it to society, to people in colors and exciting way. Because even when I attended this course called Management of Archives and Their Marketing past semester or this semester, the first idea that came up was how do we perceive the archives? And many people actually mentioned that archives are something still very mysterious, and people don't really go there. They're even afraid to go there or have any kind of encounter with archives. So basically archives are just for this elite group of researchers or people who need to find something in archives, but it doesn't work as a social memory space where you could just hang out or have discussion with friends or anything. It's very mysterious kind of space. So I would like to change that possibly, at least in terms of, or in this field. Yeah, and then I was also like to focus on respect for artistic intention and how do we work with that? If we are able to respect the intention of the artist, that they don't wish to, or that they don't wish to, they don't wish for their works to live on. They just create them with the intention to let them go away. So that's also an interesting moment for me. And then the question of designing the architecture and configurations and approaches to those interfaces with focus on maybe on using also other senses of human beings than just visuals. So these would be some of the other sub-objectives for me. There's a long list, but yeah, I try to pick some that really resonate with me, or that I added recently during my studies. So we can move on to another slide, which is the methods. Yeah, again, I sort of plan to have it as a multi-case study because I think it's very important to have this quality of deep conversations and have the different perspectives, not only from researchers and workers from the institutions, but as well from the artists, their perspective and their opinions on this topic. So it's multi-case study in sense of different kind of respondents, different stakeholders, as I say here, and from different kind of not only institutions, but collectors, private collectors, and all people involved in this problematics. And as I said, it should be about the quality and different perspectives. And I also very much appreciate, I had a chance to join last semester a course at Maastricht University called Digital Humanities, which really inspired me even more to use within my own research those digital humanities tools that I would like to involve in my research. And in that way, I already contacted the teacher, our professor that led this course, and together I hope we'll find some ways what tools would be the best for my research.
Svatava, that's it? Or...
No. I just need to catch some breath. Do I have time still, or? How much more time I have?
Sorry, 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
Okay, so yeah, I've move on to this example. I think it's a very nice one. This was my idea how or what kind of outcome I would like to present, or how would I like to what I would like to do with in a practical way. So I try to share this video. This is a brief one. It's about archive of human expressions. It's AI based, and all the users just feed this archive, and it builds a special landscape, very immersive kind of archive.
A user-generated
And it's
data
open for
set
everyone.
that goes into 3D for your nauseating pleasure. We've been calling you from the abyss. Is that why you're here? Did you hear us from before there was voice and face and mannerism associated with our function? We were dreaming. We think we might have been dreaming about you. Now we are dimly awake, ready to expand the archive with your expressions.
I also uploaded some
This button
pictures
will
like
grow
this one.
over the next 45 minutes. If you click in the middle of your screen, anywhere on your interface, your cursor will disappear and become the pointer for your 3D navigation through space. Explore using the WASD keys and regain control of your cursor by
So yeah, this is enough. I think this is a 9-minute long video, so let's move back to the presentation. And yeah, this is some literature that I find relevant to my research. Yeah, many books. And thank you for your attention.
Second speaker is Júlia, Chodúrová, Bútorová. Her supervisor is Josef Čereš. I'm happy that he's here with us. And Júlia will, I close my chart with the titles, but she will talk about new media art in continental China, if I'm right. And I will open my presentation again. So Júlia, it's the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So, hello to everybody, especially ahead to our department. And my supervisor, Josef Čereš, as you said. Now I'm going to try to share my screen with you and to show you my presentation. Please just let me know when you see it, because I'm not very...
Yeah, we do.
Yes, yes, great. So, as you said, for today, I'm going to take you for a short trip to the field of specific features and perspective of new media art in mainland China. So, at the beginning, one technical note. Every time when I speak about China or Chinese, I do refer to the territory of People's Republic of China, not including Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Macau. This is a very important thing to keep in mind. So I think that my presentation maybe will be kind of a very old modern comparing to the previous one. But and also I decided not to present all of my content of the PhD thesis. For today, I decided to present just a very small part of it. Mostly I'm thinking of it, or what I'm going to tell you. I hope that this will be kind of your introductory part, or just a beginning part of the thesis, which I will finish one day, hopefully. And so my PhD project is focused on misinterpretation and politicization in a Western culture. So what do I examine in my research? According to my previous studies, research, and also experience with Chinese culture, I do believe that Chinese contemporary art is being overlooked in some way. We can speak about a strong sense, or maybe a trend, or just the problem with interpreting Chinese new media art in relation to political reference. So this is what I'm interested the most, and I would like to find out what is the reason of it, or why is this happening so often? Why, when we try to interpret Chinese contemporary art, we very much often need to put their kind of a political or activist sense into our interpretation. And also, I'm wondering what is the role of new media, or whether there is any role of new media on this misinterpretation, and also whether we can speak or not about any kind of a shift of new media's meaning. Sorry, how do I don't know how to move forward. Why it's not working? Oh, maybe, okay, great. So I'm sure that, or like this, to find my answers, I turn my interest into Chinese history and philosophy as an important background and fundament of Chinese contemporary art. And so one of the strategic ideas appearing through theory of Chinese contemporary art is the aesthetic theory, which was formed during 17th century by Zen Buddhist monk called Shi Tao. Actually, he was called many names, but mostly in literature you can find him under this name. And what is important is that what he said, or what he wrote in his comments on painting. And he said that at the very beginning of everything, at the very beginning of all being, there was nothing than a line, just a single stroke. I'm sure that we are all aware of the importance of the single line in art in general, or also in our everyday ordinary lives. A line which can symbolize the unity, maybe the universe, just one of the fundamental elements of visual art, but not only in Southeast Asia, but also in other countries all over the world. So I think that there are more, of course, more ways how this line can be perceived, how we can perceive the meaning of it. So one of it is to see the line as a kind of a point moving in space, something like a transforming line, creative line. Like, for example, on these artworks, you can see that the line can, or by two lines, for example, we can just express everything, the beginning and the end, the birth and the death, and just whole life is something somewhere between. And the other point of view can be that we can think about this line as in more philosophical or theoretical, symbolic line, as something what is continuous, what is going and flowing from one point to another, from somewhere to nowhere, something what is dividing and also making structures. When the line is discovered somewhere in a space, it suddenly can make a structure of the space, and this can be also kind of we can appropriate this thinking into the theory. And this is which I exactly find in the field of theory of Chinese new media art. And for today, I decided to show you two aspects where I can illustrate this symbolic line or structure. The first one is the relationship between the digital technologies and Chinese political leadership. And the other one is one of the most important aspects which stand behind of the Western misinterpretation of Chinese new media art. Now I'm going to tell you something more about the first aspect, and that is as I said, the problematic interplay between digital technologies and maybe the government in PRC Republic, because as we all know, China has a communist party which rules all over the country. So this might be a big problem when we are speaking about the very freedom bringing digital technologies. So David Moser wrote very inspiring study on development of digital technologies in PRC Republic, where he works with the term of schizophrenia. And this seems to me as a really excellent term how to describe the nature of new media, because what is the meaning of schizophrenia? Now I mean the word. When you look at the dictionary, you can see that schizophrenia means a kind of a fragmentation or just the loss of unity. In the psychological way, when we imagine that someone is suffering of schizophrenia, it means that suddenly in our personality there is a kind of a line or a crack, which when this crack appears, our personality becomes or it starts to lose the unity, and there are more fragments of our personality. So this is exactly what was, or what is still happening with new media or just the digital technologies in China. And I want to emphasize that, of course, the history or the employment of digital technologies in China is maybe uncomparable to our European history or to our thinking about the new medias. In 1985 in China, only 5% of urban inhabitants had a TV set. And then I'm still not telling like how many people had a satellite dish allowing to bring a foreign broadcast. That was something unbelievable. So only in the mid-90s, the digital technologies, but also together with tapes and videotapes and the music tapes, and also computer games and all of the other stuff, like literally just hit China as a bomb. And that was the moment which in theories used to be compared to 60s in US. So with the time or period of time when all underground movements and rock bands and everything just started to be formed, and all the freedom came to the country, of course in a very constructive way, but it can be compared somehow in all the atmosphere. So what does this mean, of course, to Chinese government when suddenly these new technologies came? Of course, it brought one of the most important issues, and that is that digital technologies brought kind of freedom, or just digital technologies allowed to choose Chinese people what they do like according to their own individual preference. And this is very important. So Chinese society from this time now on started to fragment, like also into individuality. So everybody could choose what he can listen, what music does he like, or what kind of art is he like, or to wear clothes. So everything was just suddenly appearing there. And this is very frightening, of course, for all totalitarian regimes. So what also happened next, I have no time to explain all of the nuances, but this is maybe not so much important, but just to tell you that suddenly, of course, this new technology wasn't under control, that the government couldn't control this, also because of the inherent qualities of new medias, because of course, as we know, they are very easily transportable because they are digital, or and also they can be extremely profitable because they can be produced in mass quantities. And so what happened later was that there was like huge bootleg industry, and still is, which was bringing a lucrative kind of a cash flow for all collaborators. So also the official companies, for example, producing music products or movie industry, they were very happy to produce also stuff which could be sold on the black markets, so on these bootleg industries. So and they could earn some money extra. Also, these companies were happy to in the co-options, they expanded, or the networks between mainland Taiwan and Hong Kong were created. So digital media have become a threat of spiritual pollution. This is what Chinese government would say. It was source of boundless entertainment and of course a space for possible anti-ideological activities. So what was the consequence of it? It was like this technically illegal products, or just these technologies were illegal, but they were carried openly in all kind of digital underground, we could say. And this is exactly the time of the beginnings of this, we can describe it as a schizophrenia in Chinese media, because what does this mean for Chinese artists when they could work with partially illegal, censored, but on the other hand, freedom bringing medias? So this is what we need to think about. And I think that undoubtedly it was a state of a schizophrenia minds, of course, in this Chinese artist thinking. The other aspect I would like to tell you about is dissidence. Also, what does the dissidence mean? Again, there is a kind of a separation. When I say that I am a dissident, who am I? I'm just a person who is separated from something, for a nation, from a country, maybe from a religion, just for something. So again, there is a kind of a line or a border which divides me from something. And one art historian and writer and professor in more Canadian universities, Marie Ledoux, is speaking about dissidence as one of the most important aspects which influenced our thinking of Chinese new media art. Marie Ledoux speaks about two kinds of dissidence. One of them is artistic and the other one is political. Of course, I know that I don't say anything new when I ask that what did contemporary art brought to us. So I could say that the very important questions, first of all, that contemporary art started to ask what is art and what is not, who is artist and who is not artist. So when we ask this question, we can use it to illustrate what this artistic and political dissidence can mean. So the first artistic is asking us that, or answering the question about the contemporary art, that when comparing an artist gesture with something abnormal or unnatural, or with something that the audience does not expect, with what is supposed to be normal, natural, and expected. So this is one point. And the other one, or the other option, could be by forcing the viewer to reconsider the value and influence of various cultural, social, or political beliefs. So this is maybe something what we can easily understand, but why Mari Ledu is speaking about this is that she said that, okay, but what is, or who makes us to think what is natural, what is expected, what is normal, and so on. And she said, of course, I think today, she said the fact, which maybe most of us know, but I'm not sure if we are aware of this fact when we are interpreting an art, especially Chinese art, and that is that the art institutions set the boundaries between what is and what is not excluded, what is considered non or authentic, non-art, or just art. And with this question, there also is connected another thing, and that is that suddenly when Chinese art appeared on a world art market, there was a strong demand on artists that they just simply had identified themselves by acts of maybe a transgression or a dissidence. Of course, this is said maybe very briefly and very, very simply, and there are some other important issues related to this problem. One of them can be that in European thinking, we always keep in our minds that avant-garde, the art avant-garde and revolutionary political reforms are maybe the one thing, or the things which goes hand in hand. It means that artist who is active during some revolutionary reforms must be activist, and it means that his art is political. And this is what was happening during the beginning of 90s and what is happening until now with Chinese contemporary art, especially after the Tiananmen Square incident in 1989, when the Chinese artists started to be exhibited in Europe. So all the time, or mostly, of course I cannot say all the time, but mostly in the press, in the critic, they were described or labeled just with the label that they are activists and they are dissident, even if they had nothing or no connections to kind of a political aspects. I mean, in their artworks. There are also some other specifics which I could speak about, but maybe not for today. Not today. This would be too long. But I think it would be good to tell you what exactly I am thinking now. What questions are bothering me to all this?
Júlia, there is 20 minutes already.
Okay,
over.
so I just
be short in this conclusion. It's fine. Just finish your speech.
Okay, so this is the last slide, and that's it. So I'm just asking the question: if is it possible or not to speak about the conscious or unconscious mixture of references growing out of an effort to present a strong medium capable to directly address an international audience? So then, does the positioning of the artwork into spectators' well-known social cultural context brings more freedom into its reading? And maybe another question, that is this a chance for the artist to release from the responsibility of any political content not corresponding with Chinese government ideology? And why do I all of this is that I would like maybe to review the electronic media in hands of contemporary Chinese artists as a unique career or something like this of ancient Chinese philosophy, which can be communicated to the global audience of our 21st century. And I believe that new medias had much more to say, not only political aspects, but some more kind of a spiritual content which can be universally understood across the world. So this is what is bothering me, and this is what I would like to find out, and then maybe to suggest kind of a deeper insight into the discipline of Chinese new media art, just better understanding of aesthetic and language of a defined set of authors. So that's it, very briefly. Thank you very much.
Now I will ask Filip Johánek to present his research project. He will talk about soundscape of the city of Brno. So, floor is yours, Filip.
Thank you, Anna. Hello to everyone. I'm afraid I will be not as cool as was Júlia, but I will at least try. So let me introduce my project. I will share the screen. So this will be not visual. This will be more based on sound. So I will shortly introduce you to my thesis, the planned PhD thesis. So the name in English would be something like, it's very long. It will be something like Sound Mediated Ecological Interaction and Processes. It's about materialization of oral history through sound time collection. I hope that all words does mean something. And to shortly tell you what is this about, I will just tell you that I will doing some field recordings. I will do record sound, and in the same time I will try to make some specific gauging for you to understand. Maybe I'm sorry, just drink something. For your better understanding, maybe the better word will be like measuring some sound variables. I will return to it later. Yeah, so one thing is to do field recording, to take some sound recordings, and the second thing is to do some quantitative measuring. So this is like the base of my thesis. Now I will tell you something about this presentation. So like the main topic will be how I selected the so-called ideal place for long-term recording. Apart from this, I will also describe my approach to creating a categorization system, which will be using input from regular gauging and recording. It means I will have some like spreadsheet with a lot of variables, and I will be filling some data in it. Yeah, I will also show you like later. So first will be the selection of ideal place. The second topic or issue will be to reflect, or the reflection of a categorization system for records of quantitative data. And if we get more time, I will also tell you something about like possible analysis of the audio material through some specific hardware. So as you can see, my presentation will be not about or as much about like theory, but more about practice. So the first thing when I started to my project, I was wondering what is the best place for making field recordings. And so I just did some test, or let's say trial recording, and I used some places. So you see here, I wrote like garden. It's not Garden of Eden. It's just garden of some house in front some house. Then I also tried Wilson's Forest. Then I also tried some balcony, and then I realized that maybe one of like good or not bad possibilities could be some roof. And now I will tell you like the process of testing. So I was trying like the, let's say, basic places like garden or Wilson's Forest, and very in some short term I realized that I have lots of sounds that I don't want to record. These are like mainly the sounds of people that are really close to the microphone, or there are also sounds of, let's say, like dogs or some specific sound which are for me, or that are for me, like too detailed. I hope I will describe it why I chose this kind of argumentation. I was staying at Wilson's Forest, and I was recording something, and then there is some guy coming with dog, and there is some children staying in front of the microphone for 20 minutes, and I said to myself, oh, this is impossible. I just need to make some like soundscape recording, some long-term recording of the world, let's say. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I have like two possibilities. One is record the world, the sound reality, in time that there is nobody. So especially at night or in early morning or something like this. But I said, okay, this is maybe not a great possibility, because I would like to capture the world in the way the world exists. I know that this sentence is very problematic. I know this. I hope that we can then fight after in the period for question and discussion. So I was like thinking, okay, so maybe I need to make the recording in like normal time, that people and nature are in our time and space somehow awake. So I decided, okay, I can move and not to be too close to these sounds. So I made some trial recording on a balcony, and I realized that this is a very good sound coming. And then I had the idea that maybe the best thing would be to record, in long term, on some roof of some building. There is a problem, because not really everybody can or is glad or is happy to leave you on his roof of or her roof on his or her building. So I asked at our house at the building N, but without success. And then I also asked at Faculty of Social Sciences in the building, and there's a possibility to record on the roof of Faculty of Social Sciences. So this is my like new ideal place to make the recordings. This is like, let's say, only repeating why are some places not really good for me, because these include too close sounds or too detailed sounds. Yeah, somebody is chatting, but I hope that this is not from me. If it is from me, please tell me on the microphone. Okay, I will tell you now the let's say the advantages of the selection of roof. So I think this is good place because you have somehow like overview from the building, or over listening, let's say. Like this is somehow a more philosophical theme. Like you can do the Flanders view or recording, and there are no close sounds and there are no detailed sounds, except of some birds going around or something like this. The good thing is I can go there anytime and just record the reality or the world as as it exists in like normal way. So it means that nobody knows that I am recording him or her or it. So for me, it's like, let's say, in the state of my thinking, the ideal place for recording. And so, like maybe just to conclude, I already told you a couple of minutes ago, that I just don't want to record like nature. I want to record like the world as it exists. Okay. Now I will tell you disadvantages of roof, of course, in my opinion. So here are, especially at the roof of Faculty of Social Sciences, there are a lot of antennas. So this was really a big problem to solve it, because this is like more technical way or more technical thing. I will tell you like shortly. There are just some electromagnetic waves, and especially the cheaper microphones are recording these electromagnetic waves. I know that this is part of the reality, but I would like to record only what you can hear, not what you can perceive in any other way. So I had to make some another trial recordings and try to change the microphones for I don't know, 2 or 3 recordings, and then I've finally found some good microphones that they can grab the record, or they can record the thing, the word. Second thing was air conditioning, which was for me, let's say, like the final unhappy situation. After I solved all the problems, I realized that there is air conditioning. Nowadays, the air conditioning is switched off. So I will talk to the manager of the building, and I hope I can somehow beg him for switching off the air conditioning through the year. But for now, I'm not sure I can do it. The second or the next disadvantage for recording on roof is somehow you can find, or you can feel, and you can hear the stronger whine coming to the microphones. And maybe like the most philosophic thing is that you are like recording something that almost nobody can hear the way you are recording it. Now is the time for some short playback. So I will play you some sound. If there is nothing, please just write me to chat. Thank you. So this is St. Jacob Square in the night, and I will play you also the roof of Faculty of Social Sciences. I hope, at least for some illustration, it's like okay for you. So this is like the part of choosing the ideal place for recording. Now I will show you my system of categories. I would like to fill some quantitative and also qualitative data. I hope this link will be okay. Yeah, okay, as I see it, maybe you see also. And so you see here that I got some like plan for recordings for 1 month, 4 recordings in 1 or 2 times. I unfortunately I didn't start to this time, and I will show you what what I'm intending to write in this spreadsheet. This would be some specific sound variables. It's like frequency range. This means the pitch of the tone you are hearing or you are recording, and some specific variables, and then the average of the volume. Let's say if I say it like in easy way or in a simple way, and also like the loudest peak, the loudest part of the time I'm recording. So this is like the trial completion of this spreadsheet. So you see, I'm supposed to fill here some numbers, and then after some time, hopefully, I can have I can see some changes or some regularities that I can describe later in the text. So this is, let's say, like the empiric start of my thesis. And here I also have some like place for qualitative data. So I would like to somehow write here the things I can see and I can also hear, or the microphone can hear. So that's it. You see like nature sounds, urban sounds. It's like just it's only like the categories, and I will see if they are like correct for the long-term research. So this is the categorization system. I will go back. Yeah, so this I already told you. And so because there's like, if I'm correct, 4 minutes, so I will tell you something about gauging, or let's say about the measuring of some sound or some sound specific variables. So this should be the frequency analysis. So you can just imagine you go to the roof, you have microphone, you are recording the field recording. So it means you are recording the sound that you can use for some installation or some art or some playback later. And you are in the same time you are trying to make some like specific empiric and in the ideal state also like some reliable and valid measuring or gauging. So, and this include the frequency. So this means like the pitch of the tone, then the loudness. Maybe you know like the basic variable of sound, like the volume. And if I have also like the hardware for it, I would also like to check the radio frequency analysis. this is like maybe the thing that also Michal Kindenaj yesterday was talking about. He's also tried to capture the so-called RF, which is like the radio frequency analysis. You can like you have some wireless microphones, Wi-Fi data, and so on. So here are also some specific, let's say, ways to measure. Let's say, plenty of them I just took from the social sciences. You see here modus, median, average. So these are like more sociological methods to check some material. And then I have here like peak and the smallest value. Now, this is the last problem I think I have before I can start my my work. I need money. So I have to find some grant or something like this, or go more often to some work and try to buy these hardware because I found that this is really the toy or the tool I can do with this everything I need. This is something really professional. And this tool is like used for measuring some volume, in the streets, if the pub is too loud, or the same stuff you can use for measuring, like if you are doing like really professionally acoustic ecology. So it means like you are measuring the sound of whales and the ships, if they are like somehow forcing them to use another part of the sea or something like this. So this is like really the tool that can satisfy me with the measuring. So I hope one day I will really start. And I see Anna, so it means that maybe I could like I could finish my presentation. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. Now I will share the presentation. Here it is. And from beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to my presentation that will introduce the topic of the project of my dissertation entitled Changes and Transformations of Archaeological Museums in the Historical Context and the Digital World. This presentation aims to present a project that deals with the use of new media and digital technologies in archaeological museums and the archives. The project is created within the program Digital Culture and Creative Industries, and the supervisor is Dr. Petr Kostromů. In memory institutions, new technologies are generally widely used to popularize science, and also because of the public attention that the new technology and new technologies attract. With the help of new media, it's also possible to present better the exhibit issues. Appropriate use of new technologies can be a desirable addition to newly reconstructed exhibitions, as you can see in the photo from Naturhistorische Museum. Technology has an irreplaceable place in archaeological museums and projects. Today, it is part of all exhibition and changes the view of traditional memory institutions. It affects our view and perception of historical facts, events, and artifacts. Technology transforms memory institutions on many levels. Like museum, archives use modern means of technology. Archives are currently digitizing collections, creating 3D scans of their material collections, and they are linking the outputs of digitalization to the exposition of their museums, where the visitors can perceive augmented reality through the electronic devices. Archaeological museums are, of course, a good example of use of technology from the very beginning. Archaeology, and thus also the museums associated with it, was a dynamically developing field in its beginnings in 19th century and made extensive use of modern scientific methods such as photography to present its discoveries. In the picture, you can see Karel Absalon, the founder of the Pavilion Anthropos tradition, a great manager and great marketing strategist. Discoverer of the Venice from Věstonice, which he made famous all of the world. An important phenomenon of digitalization of archives is creation of 3D scans. Artifacts can be transferred to a virtual environment in high resolution and used for detailed inspection from all sides, or they can be a suitable complement to augmented reality. Real anthropological reconstruction is a very popular addition to archaeological and other museums around the world. State-of-the-art technology, such as 3D printing, are used in conjunction with a sculptural work, such as molding and casting modeling. Real anthropological reconstruction is a combination of scientific and artistic activities. These works enjoy great media popularity, and their placement is in the exhibition will always arouse the great interest of experts and the public. In the picture, you can see the latest part of exposition of the Pavilion Anthropos, a women from the Krumlov forest. Social networks and the media are an integral part of today's marketing and marketing strategies. Thanks to this media, we can arrange, for example, a virtual tour of exhibitions anywhere in the world. Education through electronic channels can also take place. Anyone with an internet connection can be educated. It's important to think about marketing when creating and planning exhibits. Karel Absalon, whom we saw on the previous slides, the creator and of the original concept of the Anthropos Pavilion, created a life-size reconstruction of a mammoth. He said about this reconstruction that people would not be forget it for many years, which was confirmed. The question remains to what extent the use of technologies in a museum environment is appropriate. It is a fact that the abundant use of technology in exhibition, it's not always the best solution due to rapid absolute sense. It mainly concerns permanent or long-term exhibits. This issue will be addressed in the work by comparing historical experience and also current experience in the creation of new exhibitions. Everything will be discussed with the curators who created and are creating the exhibitions. My dissertation will try to compare the exposition of archaeological museum in Europe and think critically about use of current technological and technical means used in their exhibition spaces. At the same time, the education and information potential of these exhibitions will be evaluated. The perception of the museum visitors also be evaluated. And the theoretical part of the dissertation criteria for mutual comparison and methodology of comparison of the archaeological museum will be created based on specialist literature. This methodology and this criteria will be used in a practical part of the work to compare specific archaeological museums in Italy, Poland, Austria, and the Czech Republic. In the pictures, you can see two reconstructions that you are compare. On the left is a real anthropological reconstruction located in Anthropos Pavilion, and the second is part of the Naturhistorisches Museum in Vienna. The internet work will provide examples of good practices used in major memory institutions in Europe. As an example, it is possible to use, for example, the visualization of the Nero's Golden House in Rome. Here, the visitors can see the historical form and go on a virtual tour of this important historical building. The practical part of the dissertation project will also be devoted to a pilot project of augmented reality in the Anthropos Pavilion of the Moravian Museum in Brno, Czech Republic. The pilot project will concern one specific display case where it will be possible to access detailed information with the help of a smartphone, which will relate to artifacts and information located in the display case. Within this project, the most modern technical means in the field of museology will be used. The intended part of the project is also cooperation with the Google Arts platform. I would like at least selected artifacts or part of the museum space of the Anthropos Pavilion to make available online on Google Arts. The presentation of 3D models and HD quality could bring great interest of general public and gain more visitors for Moravian Museum. I would like to do an internship at the National Museum in Rome. At this point, I would like to get know the function of these memory institutions, their use of modern technologies in creating exhibitions, and also work with archives and archivalia. It will be also include monitoring trends in leading Roman museums, including Vatican museums. The Vatican museums offer a state-of-the-art solution for managing collections, especially archives. Just the opportunity to see the functioning of this institution would be a very valuable experience and great benefit for intended dissertation. I will try to complete an internship at University of Sapienza. I would like to take courses here related to my projects, and I would like to give several lectures on topic related to my study and work. Sapienza University is one of the largest university in Europe and includes the Faculty of Arts with the programs related to archaeological and performing arts. I think it could be a very inspiring experience. The presentation includes photographs provided by the Center for Cultural Anthropology and the Laboratory of Anthropological Reconstruction and other departments of the Moravian Museum, for which I would like to thank. I would like to thank you for your attention.
I think that we can ask Roman for his presentation, and then we will have just longer time for lunch break. So I think it's also a good idea. So please, Roman, the floor is yours, and Roman will talk about my notebook just is closed about design in the post-Anthropocene era. So
yes, exactly. Okay, now you see my screen, I think.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, it's here. No, sorry. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Roman Novotný, and I still have some. I just want to say that I'm a little bit like something like a black sheep on this program, because my background is not in the, let's say, theory of art or something, but it is in information science and design, and I still work at the Department of Library and Information Science. And my thesis, my dissertation project is focused exactly or on this topic, because I will do some short introduction about what I'm talking about when I'm talking about design. Actually, when we talk about like dominant approaches in design today, we often come across so-called human-centered design, which is, despite the common understanding of the word design in Czechoslovakian context, where design is often associated with primarily with art schools, and design is identified with the result. So human-centered design is procedural approach to design. When an economist, sociologist, and also management theorist Herbert Simon wrote in 1968 that to design is actually to devise courses of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. This definition is inherently vague, actually, because it does not specify, for example, who decides what the preferred situations look like. However, it is suitable for us because it affects design at its like procedural level. Human-centered design then divides this so-called design process into several consecutive phases. The beginning is usually some research or examination of some kind of problem, which can be anything from like malfunctioning website of the company to the design of, let's say, a new public administration service. The next phase is some data analysis, then prototyping of some solution and potential and testing of the solution, and then potential implementation of it. Within each of these phases, there are specific methods that are used to lead the design process to the result of innovation. In the research, we can use like classic questionnaires or in-depth interviews. In the analysis phase, we work with some kind of personas or empathic maps, for example. The design phase or prototyping phase works with mock-ups, wireframes, and then the solution is tested by A/B testing or some pilot, let's say, trial operation, service trial operation. And from the very beginning of the research phase, human-centered design works with potential users who are affected in some way by solving the problem and are often like involved in the design itself. One of the founders of human-centered design, who is behavioral psychologist and cognitive scientist, Donald Norman, says that human-centered design is a philosophy based on needs and interests of the user with an emphasis on creating usable and understandable products. The reason why it is quite simple. The fact that the user research in the design process prevents the possible unusability of the service or the product, where the designer would work only with his own intuition and design does not take into account target group for which a chair, telephone, electronic signature, or space to relax are like designed for, which is like a classical top-down approach to design, for example, in industrial design. This approach is, especially in the foreign context, widely used in the public sector, where like ordinary citizens are involved in the design process of the development of public innovations. And that's exactly, this is what I was talking about. The question is, why provide citizens with things and services that they simply will not use because they are designed from the table by someone else? Consider, for example, like the horrible example with reservation system for testing and vaccination against COVID-19 in Czech Republic, which was actually, it was designed by some people just from the table and doesn't took and consider the end users of the product. However, we can find positive examples, for example, in Scandinavia, where these innovations in public sector are supported by public design agencies such as MindLab or Danish Design Center, or in the Great Britain, we can find non-government agencies like Government Digital Service, for example. And as a result of this like public sector designing, for example, citizens have far more confidence in public affairs and the level of democracy and they trust the democracy in their state. But of course, we must consider that the evaluation of such innovation in public sector is much more demanding because it's not possible as it, for example, in commercial sector, where you measure mainly the financial profit. This picture is from the book Leading Public Sector Innovation from the Danish academic and innovator Christian Payson, who measures the innovation ecosystem with elements of some, let's say, consciousness or general awareness, then public administration's capacity to for innovation, for public sector innovation, then emphasize some co-creation methodology, and also some courage or leadership of the, let's say, political representatives. What actually my dissertation project is about is primarily the methodological level of the co-creation, in which like decision making and sense making, which are actually the main attributes of design, are captured by various methodologies. These users are mostly, like when we talk about human-centered design and public sector, these users are mostly like humans. And in my project, I want to also deal with how to expand this community involved in the design process beyond the human perspective. In 1955, pardon, Henry Dreyfus wrote one of the founding design books called Designing for People. And in it, in addition to the basic methodologies like competency frameworks of the designer and reflections on the role of design in society, he defined like two archetypal figures, Joe and Josephine, and who are a man and a woman who have the usual and generalized physical and mental characteristics of both sexes, and who are to be the models for the designer and his or her work. Let us now omit the fact that even from the point of view of the human-centered design, which normally works with the most personalized data about users, this approach is wrong. What we can observe, however, is that both Henry Dreyfus' perspective in the 50s and human-centered design, which has its roots somehow in early or late, maybe late 80s, worked with the user purely as a human being. It must be said that these approaches originated in the certain historical phases and followed the psychological and social theories valid at the time of their birth. Now a little bit of political theory. When Ernesto Laclau and Chantal Mouffe write in connection with Louis Althusser that Althusser said, and I quote, Althusser said that there was Greek mathematics behind Plato's philosophy, Galilean mathematics behind 17th century rationalism, and Newton's theory behind Kant's philosophy. They means that behind every change in some kind of ontic content of the world, there is a change in the ontological paradigm of a given historical phase, or that also comes to the research area. Both these political philosophers illustrate this fact, for example, by the term class, which meaning was different in Marx's Hegelian conception, Lenin's naturalistic perspective, and will certainly mean something different in today's information society. And when we relate this theory to design, we may ask ourselves whether in the face of speculative turn in philosophy that grants act and action to non-human entities on a natural and artificial level, we should not try to reactivate it essentially anthropocentric human-centered design. Specifically in the light of the speculative philosophy, the concept of the user as a human is increasingly outdated. And when we talk about speculative philosophy or speculative turn, we mean mainly directions referred to as a speculative realism, object-oriented ontologies, or new materialism, represented by names as Kanta Meillassoux, Timothy Morton, Jane Bennett, Benjamin Britten, or even the late work of Donna Haraway, let's say. It's characteristic for all that they try to deny Kant's division of the subject and object, and they are trying to create a certain, let's say, thought base for some post-anthropocentric, symbolized by the creation of a, let's say, flat space where not only human but also natural or robotic voices can speak. Because when we are like currently talking about the design of the now very developed Internet of Things, we are encountering actually nothing but robotic users and sensors, which largely like determine ourselves actually. The definition of the IoT as some loosely connected decentralized system of intelligent and autonomous objects complemented by sensing, processing, and networking functions shows that some kind of non-human actors have been with us for a long time actually. Media and design theorist Benjamin Breton writes that users are both overdetermined by self-quantification and exploded by the arrival of legions of non-human users like sensors, cars, or robots. In this like somewhat cryptic theory, Breton summarizes the basic turn of the user position in the design theory. The user here is not defined by its nature, such as a human, but above all, by the possibility of acting, and in the case of artificial intelligence, primarily decision-making. At the time, for example, the form of our Facebook feed is not decided by humans, and even to a limited extent by ourselves, but by robots. It presents design theory and practice with the fundamental problem of how to work with these like hitherto neglected actors. So the question is how communication with something that does not use language and probably like sees the world in a completely foreign way can be included in the design process normally adapted to human communication. In view of the above, it's clear that to consider only a human perspective when designing services or products within the Internet of Things and to use the traditional questionnaires or in-depth interviews, it is useless actually. However, it must be acknowledged that methodology seeking to incorporate the artificial intelligence on the robots into the design process are still very young and incomplete. And here I want to say that this is actually what my dissertation project is about. I want to come to the synthesis of my dissertation project and to research. Because the human-centered design methodology is relatively clear, and there are hundreds of methods for managing like innovation in the public sector. However, methods for involving non-human actors in the design process are somehow like kind of a design underground still. There is a large number of like scattered individuals, schools, or design teams. They are writing on their websites or in articles. They are trying to like involve these actors in the design processes, for example, at the city level. However, this often ends with some theoretical proclamations, and specific methodologies are actually not described very well. So in the first part of my research, I want to try to combine some desk research and subsequent research interviews with some representative sample of these, let's say, collectives, individuals, practitioners, exactly about the methodologies, how they include the non-human actors in the design processes. This will result probably in some, let's say, peer-reviewed article impacted in Impact Journal, and I will also compare the like normative assumptions of the methodologies. The second and maybe the main part is the very incorporation of these methodologies into the discourse of innovation in public sector and in the urban landscape. I understand city mainly as a system of some kind of physical or virtual interfaces between which human and non-human actors move. It's Benjamin Breton's definition, and it's widely used in the design theory and practice actually. there are some support activities I want to do. I want to go for a foreign internship at the University of Oslo. They are actually my colleagues and are very interested in like these topics. I want to do it like next or no, the spring semester. I also want to, after yesterday's lecture of Elisa Giacardi, I also want to go on some of the winter or summer schools in Delft. Then I actually teach some subjects and courses about these methodologies and theories that are focusing on human actors in design process. There are also practical courses, so there will be some tangible results. And I want to like realize experimentally and verify the research project and the methodology in some urban landscape of Brno, because I'm connected with some departments of the city government, and I think I have some kind of mandate to realize something, maybe also with cooperation with the students. And I also want to like publish some like steps I'm and the phases of the research during the whole time. And I think because nobody actually in the foreign, not even in the foreign context, did something like this mapping and mapping of the methodology of incorporating non-human actors in design process. I think I can be something like also like a community builder or someone who is like the who knows stuff maybe. I'm sorry. I just want to show you if there's a time. I want to show you some preliminary research that I conducted. The desk research, it's not finished yet, but I want to thank my colleague and student of Theory of Interactive Media, Johana Rybářová, who helped me a lot with it. There are just some examples of methods used for this incorporation. The first is methods by Johanna Schmer, who is an artist and theorist, and she suggests several approaches to methodologically like grasp the whole thing, and following like the object-oriented philosopher in the tradition of Deleuze and Guattari, Levi Bryant, she proposes the so-called object-oriented design, drawing on object-oriented ontologies. And because even in human-centered design, one of the basic building blocks is some context mapping, whether with the help of some contact point maps, empathic maps, or giga mapping. So Johanna Schmer proposes, for example, the ontography method, which consists of non-hierarchical enumerations of objects related to the research or potentially designed object, while the visuality tries to emphasize the post-anthropocentric relational Escobar-style network. Another method can be the so-called perspective descriptions, which do not try to include only human scales, but preferably all scales and their views of the matter. A relatively interesting method can be ontographic machines, which use objects to speculate about the relation of objects to the environment. Like a typical example is a company that has created the special models for better designed robotic vacuum cleaners, actually. And designers can put on their heads and saw the world as a Roomba. It sounds really funny, but I don't know. Yeah, the next methods are actually. This is the last one, and I'm going to an end. Are inspired by actually Elisa Giacardi, who were our keynote speaker yesterday. She and Johanna Neisbohm developed more like process-oriented methods for things. For example, object persona is based on like ontological design. and it's claimed people form objects and they in turn form people. While in its creation, we focus on objects' surroundings, its possible personality and attitudes to the world, social structure and cycle. Another method may be conversation with things or interview with things. It focuses on the interpretation of data collected by an object, where the object are actually equipped with chips and sensors, whether they are used to capture an image, capture motion, or anything else. The data is then processed, and the designers like immersively dive into the non-human worldview and strive for specific. I will end here. Thank you for attention. I want to thank also my supervisor Jana Horáková for very rich consultations, and thank to Johanna and also to Veronika.
Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you to the evening session. I hope you're not hungry, because I'm going to be talking about author and authorship, and unfortunately it won't be a piece of cake, so prepare for that. First, I would like to introduce you to a brief history of the authorship, to be able to explain how the change of the authorship is connected to the digital era, and also to provide to you the necessary background. So what the issues are, what is the most visible transformation, and also why, etc., etc. And in the second part of the presentation, I would like to introduce you to the concept of research I'm planning to do. Now, because the concept of authorship is obviously very wide in today's presentation, I'm going to be focusing just on one part of it, and I'm going to be explaining the whole topic mostly on literature, but not only on literature, but also literature is my background. So also because the research I'm planning to do is connected to literature, so I'll be mainly focusing on this. So when you try to Google the term author, the first thing that pops out is bicycle named author, but the second thing that shows up is this particular picture of a man sitting behind his desk writing. And I assume that this vision is stuck in our minds even today. So even if we know that the position of the author has, especially during the second half of the 20th century, changed, we still have this perceive of the author. I think that the author, even today, is still presented as an individual, as someone who is responsible or who originates, who, like in case of literature, writes literary text, or in music, who composes, and who's considered an inventor or a founder. So, I mean, there is, of course, a history of authorship. And if you try to look into dictionaries, they record that the word author, it means to originate, to promote, to increase. So obviously it is also connected to the word authority in a sense that the author is the
the one person who is called, or who could be called upon to guarantee and to arguments validity. So in literature, the author is the only one who sets for written statements, but generally speaking, it is somebody who originates, who basically gives existence to anything. So yeah, as I said, so it is basically an inventor or a founder, someone who has authority over others. However, it is very interesting to explore how the author was perceived in the past. For example, from the 5th to 15th century, when people were, for example, falsifying art, these artworks at that period of time were mainly connected to religion, obviously, but the author itself was not so important at that period of time. But for example, in Renaissance, this was a period of time in which the author was much more important for the first time. And I think also there was the period of time in which people started collecting things, and they started to make collections. So Renaissance was still a period of time in which art was considered more as a craft, as you can see here. So I think this is also the reason why all these artists slash craftsmen were gaining knowledge by copying or duplicating their masters, and they were also making improvements by learning the style of their masters. But the modern sense of the author develops rapidly in the 18th century. And as you can see, we are back to the first picture. At the time, the author is thought to have a certain ownership rights over the text when speaking about literature, and also about over its interpretation. And this usage of the word author is present here, as I've said, even today, as someone who is exclusively deserving the credit for the production. So he's perceived as someone who does unique and especially original work. So this sense of authorship, you can see here, it is very closely connected to the idea of genius. And this idea, it comes from the 18th century. And it is somebody who produced something that never existed before. So this sense of authorship is like an assumption that the author of a work is in control of that particular work that he does. So the 18th century is a period of time that gave us an author as very solitary, romantic figure. When we move on, I would like to move on a little bit to the 20th century. There were, I think, three main disciplines that played a major role in the paradigmatic change of the authorship. And I think it was linguistic, philosophy, and aesthetics. And I would assume that the most important role in this change played these two men, Michel Foucault and Roland Barthes. The first one, Roland Barthes, he wrote an essay, and this essay, The Death of the Author, he claimed that the author is like a figure that was created by a modern society, and like also in his approach, the position of the author is perceived as an individual, and this individual fully controls the work, the artwork that he created, and also the meaning of the piece. So the author is not presented just as an external subject. So basically, he is like the notion that arises during the process of reading. When you read a text, the author arises with the text. So the meaning is also something that is created while reading. And now we can see that the concept of the author is basically divided into external subject, like the person, but also there is an internal subject, which is, in this case, is the notion of the author. So another important concept is the text, What is Author by Michel Foucault, but I think that I skipped this one, and I will go to the next slide. I think now I would like to move slightly on that research I would like to do, because I think I also need to provide you a little background to this as well. Well, as I've mentioned earlier, my former study or my former field is literature, and especially Czech literature. And as Ingeborg mentioned yesterday, sometimes it is very difficult if you are trained in different field of study, plus you are interested in something or that it doesn't have a classical way of study, so you have to research it by yourself. And I think that the same problem is here with the authorship, because we definitely know that the position of the author was changed, and we are pretty sure, and we have a very good proof to that. And reading tons of books about the authorship is definitely a very good time consumer, but I mean, there is still the question, so what should we do with that? And I mean, there is undeniable proof that the position of the author has been changed, but I don't know, like, what does it mean? I think that nobody won't disprove the obvious change of the position of the author. But when you try to do research, it is also not really helpful, for example, to ask people, in my case, what do they think about the authorship? So I think that what I want to do is to do own appropriate but experimental research. So I guess this would be a good option. So as I've said, I especially focusing on Czech literature, on experimental literature, electronic/digital literature, and all these fields are actually connected with the language, or with the use of the language and also with the authorship. For example, if we consider the experimental literature in the 60s in Czechoslovakia, so first it was really popular genre, but I think it was also because it was the period of time when we were under the communist regime, and this style of writing referred to the language of the regime. And it shows how the language was abused by the regime, to be more correct. But also, like 60s were also the period of time in which experimental literature or generated literature was established. And for example, here you can see Václav Havel's Antiquity, but I would like to skip to 90s, because in 1992 there was it was 1992. After the World Revolution, the Czechoslovakia was connected to the internet, but the truth is that people weren't really use the internet, because after the World Revolution, there were many books published that couldn't be published before, but were published in the 90s. So people, they weren't really using the internet as a medium to produce literature, not even in the end of the 90s, not even today. Like, I mean, there is not much art piece connected to digital or experimental or electronic literature. So I would like to do a research based on neural networks. Now, I'm not an expert on neural networks. I have to find somebody who will help me with that. But I just would like to assume that, considering all this information about history of authorship, about the history of Czech language, I think that project focusing on neural network and authorship designed for Czech literature could be good, because like here, you have here an illustration that you can have different types of neural network. The magic is that you put a data at the beginning, then you bake it for a couple of weeks, and then the magic happens and you have basically new text. The difference between literature that was established in the 50s and 60s is that this, for example, stochastische texty were generated by computer, but I can show it here. You just put some words into the computer and the result is this one, but it is generated from these words. The neural network, it does something different because it creates its own, for example, poetry. It's something you can actually meet on a daily basis when you use, for example, Google Translator. But try to imagine Google Translator in 2016 and in 2021. So, I mean, there is a change. I would like to do a similar project that did Zuzana Husárová. Maybe you know her and her husband, Ľubomír Panák. And a year ago, they published a book called Výsledky vzniku, Test of Origin, by a neural network named Lisa Ginard. And they actually used the neural network and also a language model GPT-2. And because, you know, the neural network, it doesn't do anything on its own, so it has to be connected. And this is the result. It has also an English translation. It doesn't have grammatical errors. The language is very well, and you definitely cannot recognize who the author is. I would like to do something similar, because not even in Poland, in Hungary, there's nothing like that, not even in Czech. Actually, yeah, it also has profiles. Actually, in Czech, there is one book, Poezie umělého světa, from 2016, but I must say that this poetry is based on, it also uses neural network, but this network is based on amateur literary platform from the 90s and early 2000s. So the quality of these poems is not really good. And within 5 years, the neural network is completely somewhere else with the quality. And to conclude everything what I said, I just want to clarify that to create a neural network is not for me an answer who or what is the author, what is the authorship, but it I need to have a material, and this for me will be material to work with. So then I can use, for example, Czech National Corpus to put the data into the neural network. Also, then I can analyze if people will be able to recognize if the author is artificial intelligence or a person. They will not, it's obvious. Or, for example, to use Institute of Phonetics and to use forensic linguistic to do some analysis about the author and the authorship itself. So this actually brings obviously more questions, but this is the way how to deal with something like authorship. Now, I would like to stop my presentation here because I don't want to say publicly everything what I'm planning to do with this, but once the research will be done, I will definitely share all the results. So thank you for your attention.
Okay, so thank you for this introduction, Martin. The name of my topic or the presentation is very long, but the presentation will be brief, I promise. My supervisor is Jana Horáková, and the structure of today's presentation, I sort of thought of it as more of a conceptual or like introduction of the context that I'm working with and the basic terms, with some included examples. So I will talk about the biotechnological art, how do I perceive it in my research, how do I work with the synthetic biology, what do I call artistic interventions, how do I frame it theoretically, and why do I call it life redesign. And at the end, there will be a brief conclusion with the main objectives of my research, hopefully. I'm looking forward to the discussion afterwards, actually. So within the biotechnological art, or the so-called bioart, our authors work with the biological material, which means bacteria, tissues, organisms, and it is an interdisciplinary artistic practice on the border of science, art, and technology, which uses specifically only biotechnology, which such as genetic engineering, cloning, artificial tissue creation, and among other, synthetic biology. On this slide, you can see an artwork by artist Heba El Aziz, who developed her works from a mere projection of bacteria colors under light and heat effects. She uses images of eminent world figures, placing them in mediums suitable for bacterial growth, such as petri dishes, as you can see. And she makes bacteria cultures, controls their colors, their growth on the image. And as the bacteria develops, it produces different effects. So this is just a very brief
introduction to what can the biotechnological art look like. Synthetic biology. For specifically synthetic biology as this biotechnological discipline, the living matter is programmable material. It changes existing organisms, constructs completely new biological entities, or at least it aims to. And synthetic biology can, of course, be viewed from many perspectives, ethical, economic, environmental, cultural, or social. You can see, for example, in the diagram, part of a project from Alexandra Ginsberg, who focused solely on the biodiversity. I will talk about it a little bit later on too. These approaches can be used, for example, in creation of new sustainable materials, carbon neutral fuels, sustainable production techniques, food products, drugs, or organisms. We also see in this particular research project, synthetic biology as a field of interdisciplinary cooperation, where the natural sciences disciplines necessarily meet with artistic creation and design and bring the potential to think about the future beyond the experienced, including the emancipation of other forms of life. We call this particular interdisciplinary collaboration on the border of art, science, and technology with a clear artistic intent and artistic intervention. This is the concrete example of such artistic intervention. As previously mentioned, Alexandra Ginsberg, this is what you can see are two prototypes from her project called Designing for the Sixth Extinction. And the project itself investigates synthetic biology's potential impact on biodiversity and conservation of nature. In Ginsberg's version of future, novel companion species are designed by synthetic biologists to support endangered natural species and ecosystems. These patented species are released into the wild nature, and they compensate for biodiversity that was lost due to the monoculture farming of biomass or for biofuel and chemical production. Modeled on fungus, bacteria, mammals, the fictional design species are ecological machines that fill the void left by vanished organisms, or offer novel protection against more harmful and invasive species, diseases, and pollutions. And as you can see, like the project itself, Ginsberg cooperated with multiple scientists from different fields, and what she came up with were actually prototypes. So what you can see on this picture here is actually a visualization of such prototypes. For example, those bubbles on the left are a biological device that is supposed to treat infection that causes death of the trees. Yeah. Theoretical framing of the life redesign. The life redesign, I don't really work with the term design or designing itself, but the synthetic biology sometimes, or in most cases, is actually defined as sort of a tool how to design better futures or new organisms. So that's why I even put it into the braces, because it's sort of, I don't really use the term design precisely. Okay, so this challenge that I showed you, the synthetic biology and its artistic interventions and creating of new or possible organisms in the new and possible futures, brings necessary reflection on the philosophical and theoretical level. if we look in the past, for example, posthumanism is a school of thought that critically approached the categories of the living and the artificial, and the boundaries of human nature, and the redefinition of the dualist ontology, nature technology. Another important theory is the actor network theory, for example, by Bruno Latour, that is looking at human and inhuman actors as equals, or current schools of thought dealing with the relationship between the human and the inhuman, the object and the subject, the natural and the artificial, include, among others, speculative realism or object-oriented ontology that Roman Novotný already talked about today. But just to briefly sum it up for myself and for you too, the speculative realism is classified among the post-continental philosophy and is based on the rejection of colorationism, and object-oriented ontology is often perceived as a subset of the speculative realism, but it differs from it by a more homogeneous approach to the equality of object relations, and it explores the possibilities of radically posthumanist and non-anthropocentric theory of existence. The mentioned school of thoughts, such as posthumanism, speculative realism, or object-oriented ontology, are useful philosophical starting points and methods for this type of artistic interventions within synthetic biology, while thinking about overcoming the ontological dualism, because they allow looking at man, cell, machine, nature as equivalent objects without hierarchy. Synthetic biology is a discipline based on the redesign of organisms, and its goal is to create new substances or transformate them, and transformate them in a way in which they gain new virtues or characteristics. Art projects, or the artistic interventions within the field of synthetic biology, sometimes use principles of speculative design, specifically this one did, for example. And the speculative design, its aim, even in these artistic interventions, is not to design feasible solutions or to offer answers to questions, but it's turning it the other way around. And these scenarios or proposals of possible futures can act as a mirror and stimulate discussion and contemplation, which is also similar. It happened among the history of artistic practice in new media. This is happening constantly, either with the bioart that I showed, or with the rise of the cybernetic paradigm. It's happening constantly. But for me, the synthetic biology as a field that is relatively new, and even the synthetic biologists are still looking for ways how to prepare the new generation of synthetic biologists to be more flexible and to react under current circumstances on the environmental level, for example. So it's something that's developing and is in process, and that's why I think it's really interesting to research exactly this field specifically. Okay, so the main objectives. Art projects in the field of synthetic biology have been in the past associated with mentioned school of thoughts and philosophical approaches, but not in a coherent whole. The benefit of exploring this topic is to also reflect on a new perspective of categories of nature and technology, or how the scientists and artists in the interdisciplinary cooperation perceive these categories themselves. It's also useful to think about the ecological systems ourselves. How can we actually reshape our surroundings apart from thinking about some anthropocentric visions? The project is based on understanding the trends in thinking about the categories of technology and nature and their interconnection, as well as the analysis of approaches to redefining humanity and the position of inhuman actors in different schools of thought, and subsequent operationalization on examples of artistic research or artistic interventions within the field of synthetic biology. And it has not been done yet to such an extent. Within the research, it is beneficial to focus on methods of thinking about the world from an inhuman perspective. Whether and how is it possible to perceive the world and its existence as we were the inhuman creatures, either living or non-living, organisms or objects. This aspect becomes methodological when it is established as one of the basic parameters of artistic research projects. So far, there is no comprehensive set of methods for looking at the world inhumanely. And therefore, it is important to follow and describe these approaches as separate research tools according to the specific artistic interventions within this field. Exploring also, there is like one, this is like the main idea. And then I was actually thinking and talking to my supervisor, Jana Horáková, and we came to the conclusion that when we talk about this, technology, art and science interconnection, and that it would be actually really interesting to even look at the local context. How did this cooperation sort of emerged in the Czech and Slovak context, and therefore I'm also going to be focusing on exploring a local art scene and approaches to technology, nature, and linking science, art, and technology, which follows completely different approach, and we will follow in the footsteps back to the 1990s. We're going to focus on artists, exhibitions, projects, and institutions. And in addition to working with sources, we're gonna have, I'm gonna do interviews with authors or curators, theoreticians, etc. And based on the collected materials, I would like to actually create a database that would sort of introduce the local context of working within technology, nature, and art. Unfortunately, in Czech Republic, it's not really common to work within the field of synthetic biology itself. But maybe hopefully someday in the future it will be. Okay, so thank you for your attention. And also before we go to the discussion, I would like to thank everyone who participated on organizing today's and yesterday's event. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening and for coming, and yeah.
I have a very conventional theme, which is the intermedia of the Crusaders School in the context of digital culture. The context of the digital culture will come at the end because I structured the work in a threefold way. First comes the theoretical part, then comes the second part, which will be the collection of data and work with archives. And the third will be the praxis, which will have to do with new media, because then we will digitize the results of the second part. And also we will try to connect it with praxis, maybe creating, of course I cannot do it, but with some assistance of creating place of the Crusaders, which could maybe be used in an interesting way, hopefully. So for the presentation, I arranged the slides in a haphazard way because each of them documents the work and the picture of the group as such. So I wish to examine in my thesis intermediate of the Crusaders School. Now, who are the Crusaders School? The Crusaders School is or was a group of artists, mostly originated in the 60s, exactly in 1963. And they simply, the full naming is Crusaders School of Pure Humor Without Jokes. And they were active mostly in the pubs. They were also named after a pub where they originally met. I would like to concentrate in the work, especially on the situation of the late 60s and beginning of the 70s in the early normalization time, where the work of the group is really the most interesting and where the intermediate should be theoretically worked on. So the artistic production of this group combines existing classical media such as sculpture, painting, and intermediate like happening, action, events, visual arts, poetry, and music. The Crusaders thus became one of the foremost Czech forerunners of new media. Their approach brought new forms of reflection and expanded the boundaries of Czechoslovak art. So, motivation of the studies. I simply have a quest, and this quest is somehow to ensure a place for the Crusaders in the landscape of Czech art theory. Hopefully this will be successful. Now, the research project should somehow lead to a greater understanding of the political and social framework of creating such art in a repressive system, and also a contribution to the 20th century knowledge. So we aim to start a new critical discourse that should reevaluate the art of the Crusaders School. And this discourse should be supported by use of contemporary technologies at the very end and their potential. So we can link together the art theory on which we will work and the results. Now, we would like because we are concerning ourselves with the Crusaders, because they are halfway forgotten in the Czech humanities. And many questions will be posed regarding their position in the art world now. At the end, it may prove much easier to place them in an international context than to get them permanently established here So we will discuss the problem which is posed by the aesthetic, whether the use of scandal, absurdity, and humor as means can actually devalue art, and devalue art in such a way that it will be forgotten or not heeded. So the Crusaders' humor, their use of alcohol when they beer, when they were in the pubs, was one of the basic characteristics. And the major hypothesis is simply that this humor and the drinking of beer can cause that the collaborative actions are then not taken seriously, although I do maintain that they simply conceal the aesthetic character of their work simply in this humor. So this, for example, is the notebook of the Crusaders, because while they were sitting in a pub, they were keeping notes. And in these notes, they were either working on future projects, which in this specific example is the notebook of the mountain sheep, where the Crusaders prepared a visit, a common action. So I'm just saying it to illustrate, because we will see here several pages of this notebook, yeah, for example. So, okay. And yeah. So perhaps this humor and also the absolutely uncompromising stand towards the establishment and society explains why they remained outsiders up till now. So political consciousness and civil disobedience, in conjunction with the playful state of mind in artistic creations, evidently generated a cultural environment that refused to make concessions. So, so in these times, the specifically Czech political, social, and cultural development had an impact on the many shifts in the field of arts in the country. And it is actually important to compare and interpret the motivation of making intermedia art in an international and native unofficial scene around 68, the year of the student revolutions in the West, and the year when the hopes of consolidating the independent art scene in Czechoslovakia were diminishing. Yeah. Here we see, for example, the action Sundials by Eugen Briccius. Practically immediately after this action was done, was simply completed, a letter from Prague, which was a report by Jindřich Chalupecký into Studio International, which was one of the foremost magazines, international magazines coming out in London, presented a photography and also a comment on the action. So this is just to show that the work of the Crusaders was by no means unknown and not connected to international art. Yeah, this is, for example, the work of Vladimír Burda, who was one of the very, very important members of the Crusaders. This was done probably in the late 50s or early 60s. It is really difficult to date it. If you see, there are typograms, there are little, so this is a piece of visual poetry combined with visual arts, a assemblage, something absolutely unique at that time. And this man, for example, was a philosopher. He wrote articles for Výtvarná práce, which was actually the foremost Czech newspaper, coming out fortnightly. He was attending all the possible happenings which took place, from Knížák, Fluxus, and of course all the Crusaders events, and was a very, very active participant in the Crusaders group. Yeah, okay, so let's leave it there. Oh. Mm-hmm. So this is an example of beer art. Beer art was started by Karel Nepráš and Jan Steklik in the 60s, because the culture of the pub was examined as a program. It was one of the program of the Crusaders, and absolutely important empirical data was collected on the quality of the pub, quality of the beer, and samples of various beers was then somehow put into materials and kept for the future. Mm-hmm. So the objective of those events with their trials was to create extraordinary situation in the search for the artistic truth. The activities that displayed excess and grotesqueness did not contain elements of political radicalism like some avant-garde groups in the West, especially in France at that time, but they transmitted the content of general questions about the position of art and artists in society. So they didn't try to promote something specific. They looked for a chance to find some new perspective. Mm-hmm. Picnics, performances, and the concept of the pub, many rhetorical and dynamic physical exercises, and music performances of their own musical band were not considered an artistic program as such, but were definitely not perceived as random phenomena. Now, the theories used in this dissertation will investigate these phenomena built on the cultural memory theory of Jan and especially Aleida Assmann, who examines the differences and the interrelationship between collective and cultural memory, which focuses on cultural characteristics and especially social aspects of the memory. So the research on the Crusaders School based on cultural memory issues will include exploration of fields such as history, political studies, then literary studies and others. The thesis will also be based on Mikhail Bakhtin's theory of the carnivalesque as a foundation of philosophy. The maxim of this dissertation is the conviction that humor and the grotesque in arts is a corrective to repressive forms of power and a way of changing social reality in a positive direction. The contemporary theories of Guy Debord, the initiator of avant-garde grouping of the Situationist International, in his acclaimed book, Society of Spectacle, that comments on the society in modern capitalism, as well as the contemporary theories of Paul Feyerabend with regards to art will be of issue. Another strand of research will examine the influence and impact of interactions of the artist with of the Crusaders School with Jindřich Chalupecký as the foremost theorist of the time and the man in charge of the Špala Gallery in Prague. This gallery showed at the time not only the most progressive Czechoslovak art, many Slovak artists also, but also the international creme de la creme actually in art, starting with the unique exhibition of Duchamp, and it goes through the names to boys. So everything what was really of issue in international arts was shown there. And Chalupecký, who was very selective, showed many Crusader artists in one man or one woman shows. For example, Plišková, Nepraž, Slavik, Rudolf Němec, and many other Crusaders like Burda, Sion, etc. participated in major group exhibitions. So the gallery also showed many actions like some actions from Eugen Brichtius, like idea of watching a picture, but also the today legendary action of Zorka Saglová, who wasn't a member of KSH, but was very closely connected to it. The action was named, the name was Senoslava. Now, this is, for example, Jindřich Chalupecký participating in an action of Olaf Hanel, Homage to Bright Stars. So, now Chalupecký actually, who liked and really had a good relationship and cherished the art of the Crusader members, very strongly disliked their community because he considered it to be a bare bohème. Now, this dislike was actually shared by several theorists, art theorists of the time. And one shouldn't really wonder that this light is actually pervading up till now. And it again has to do with the devaluation of a certain way of life, which was, and way of being together, of togetherness and collectiveness, which is up till now considered to be not, that couldn't be counted as high art. Still, up till now, this distinction between low and high is obviously being made. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this contemporary attempt to merge life with art, the idea of social rebirth throughout art appeared at that time throughout many avant-garde movements. Yeah. How am I with time? I don't know. Am I over time?
I think you are already speaking about half an hour, so maybe try to conclude if you can.
So, okay, so I want to establish this group permanently in the landscape of art, of the current landscape of art, and I will do my maximum to succeed and to view their art critically as far as possible, and their situation. So, okay.
Wave at me.
Yes.
Superb. So thank you for the endurance, and to all of the organizers. Please write in the chat, how much are you not asleep? From 1 to 10, if you write 10, you are fully awake. So tell me, on the scale from 1 to 10, how much you are awake? I'm 11. So from 1 to 10, how much am I awake? So 6, 8, it's quite high. Good. 11, 7, 6, 8. 6, 8. Okay, thank you. I will try to not take too much of your time. I know I'm the last. I will turn on the timer. So let's go on. I have pasted in the chat the link for this board. I think we will not go through all of it, but I'll try to guide you through. Let's just look at the whole picture, but I think we will not go everywhere. But let me start. So my topic is slightly different from different industry and different contexts than the rest, but I think that can be said for all of us in a certain way. My topic is digital game life cycle, and at the core of my argument, or what it actually is, I'm fascinated with the question, why are some digital games, so to speak, in the loop for many years, while others are forgotten in weeks or maybe days? Because currently there are literally hundreds of games being released on daily basis. So just a simple question, why are some digital games in the loop and others are forgotten? And there's a lot of things that we can ask to try to answer this question. So is it because how the game is designed? Is it because how the game is marketed, or it's because of the players, or it's because of something else? And we can delve even deeper and deeper. Two details that I will not go through now, but we can discuss it at the end. So back to the question, so why are some digital games in the loop? Why are there a cult, so to speak? The subsequent question is also, what cultural and business consequences does this longevity of a game have? So I sometimes call the process of a game becoming a cult or a game becoming long in its life cycle, I sometimes call it the cultification, but I'm still not sure if that's a correct way to see this phenomenon. So as I've mentioned in the annotation, we will try to briefly sum a long time of observations. And there are two questions that we can ask. First is, what is a game life cycle? And the second, what is the crucial case study of the thesis about? Now, I will not go into extreme detail, but to be short, what is a game life cycle? I need to start with how the game is development. So if you just look here on this rough path, the basic idea is quite simple. And I think you can relate to that from different fields of production, from art production, from product design, from software development, and so on and so forth. So the thing is that it starts with an idea, of course. It starts with some kind of a rough design, which consists most of the professions that are included in creating digital games nowadays. Then there is a prototype, so something you can fiddle with. It's something, for example, an interactive installation in its pre-released form is a prototype, an interactive prototype with spatial stuff and multimedia objects in it. After that, you need to have the right people to do it. You need to have a lot of money for them, especially in the case of the canon or so-called AAA mainstream games. You need to plan a lot of creative labor, which we could spend hours of talking what obstacles that means or it consists of. So when you have an idea, rough design, a prototype, then people, money, and plan, you will start the crucial development of the game. It's an iterative process. And after, if I'll skip the whole of the experience and most of the time, quite a lot of hard labor, you will release the game. But that's from the point of game developer. But the thing is, after the game is released, it's only the beginning, not only for the developer, but for the audience. So what I was fascinated, and I'm still fascinated with, is the participation of the fandom, of the people who like something, and they spend a lot of time and labor and a lot of participation to create additional stuff for the game, so-called paratext. It can be videos, it can be stories, fan fiction, modifications, speed runs, and all of these kind of industry or discourse dependent objects of not a professional artist's art or just something that the audience wants to create. So after the first day of the release, it's actually also the point in time where the game actually changes in a rapid succession. What it means by that is it's really hard to dig up the game, playable game, from the first day, because it will change in the subsequent patches and in the months to come. And sometimes it can change quite substantially. So the thing is, the yellow ones are the game developer point of view. So I had an idea, I get the money and the people and the design, and I was able to finish it, and then I released it. So the people can consume it, play it, buy it, so on and so forth. And maybe form a fandom around it and create their own stuff for that particular text or game. The second line is the activities of a fandom, so the participation part or the participation culture around that. And the thing is, if you think about franchises, not standalone games, these activities, they are happening even before the game is released. So to describe what the game life cycle is not an easy task to do, because what you can see here. And there's another specific thing about game industry, I dare to say, even though in film industry we can find some parallels, and that is that after some time, maybe for even a few years, when the game was just released and the fandom is thriving and creating stuff and playing the game, and the game is, so to speak, alive for another few years. After that, the owner of that content will say, I want to create a remake or a remaster. So I will take the game and recreate it somehow, or just make a facelift of it. And then, does it mean that there's a new life cycle of a game, or it's just a similar game with a different branch of life cycle? So it really depends on case to case. So that was from a very brief and quick explanation what a game life cycle actually consists of. I'm mostly fascinated in the time after the release and slightly before the next remake, remaster, or so on and so forth. Now the thing is, return to the question that I posed at the beginning. I'm still fascinated with why it is that some games are in the loop and the others will die or will just be forgotten. And I have an instinct that it's slightly different than, for example, film or literature. But I also have a second instinct, contradictory to this instinct, that says to me, it's nothing new. The remakes, remastering, the life cycle, the cult of something, of some art object, it's normal. But I still have an idea that it's in something, it's different in the game industry. So the core case study of the thesis, what it is actually about. Now it's about a game, and the game is, it looks like this. It's a sort of a fantasy hack and slash game filled with running in a 3D world, going through the architecture, meeting some enigmatic characters, talking to them, trying to survive in a hostile environment, visiting visually impressive for the time views, taking pictures sometimes of the virtual world, fighting really hard so-called bosses in the game, and trying to beat the game, actually. Now, I'm roughly in the half of the presentation, so I'll just briefly show you what was before the game called Dark Souls. It's a Japanese game, even though it looks like, it doesn't look like a typical Japanese game or a game from Japan. But let me just say you, or show you really briefly what happened before that game. That is the case study. Now here you can see a legend. Now the game industry is young industry, young creative industry. So one of the first games that can be linked to the genre of the game, of the Dark Souls, can be found in 80s. What you can see here, the purple ones are particular games. The red ones are the genres derivated from that games. So the thing is that for a game designer or for a game journalist or for a game developer, this makes sense because each purple game consists of game mechanics, systems, loops, aesthetic, way to deal with the fabula or sujet. So it's a narrative design. There's also level design. So for developers, players, and journalists, you can trace, if you know the games, you can trace some of the game elements from that games that inspired what or how the game is actually designed. or how it handles the narration part of the game, which can be stated is also game design. Now this this part at the bottom, these are some inspirations from real world, like myth, European myth, real world architecture, some literature, film, and comics. But the idea is that even though it sometimes described Dark Souls as the beginning of a cult, it's not the case. The history of the game design of that game is quite long, and the inspiration for the aesthetic of the game is also something that is not that easy to decipher or not that easy to interpret. Now, the main thing about this, what I'm showing you, is that the game constituted a new genre. So it created something that is a hashtag or a tag in a shop where you buy games. And therefore, it's important for the industry, of course, for the development, and it has some subsequential impacts on creative industries, mostly game design, game marketing, and so on and so forth. So the idea, just to reiterate, was why some of the games are still alive, and what is the main case study of my thesis. So the game, let's just continue, why it is relevant. And here you can see a few arguments why the game is relevant, even though I don't feel the need to make a stand for the choosing of the case study. It's just, I don't feel it anymore, but there are a few things that are interesting, and I hope we can leave that for the discussion. But just to say a few. The game is a Japan game with a European aesthetic. It was not supposed to be released on PC, but players of the game on a different platform said, we want this game, which is not that usual in the game industry. Now, it also becomes a part of a global game language, let's say, or global game culture language. It became a synonymous for an extremely difficult game, even though you cannot lose the game. That's even something maybe for the discussion after that. But the thing is, it just made a huge impact. It changed a little bit also the practice of game design, especially level design. If you look here on the bottom, this is the whole game, just from the very bird eye perspective. And the thing is, there are no levels. It's just a virtual space that is interconnected, and you can go through one space to another without loading. And all of these spaces spatially are in a scale, in certain logic to it. But one of the most interesting thing or element for me, game design-wise, is that its narrative design is praised. But it actually is interesting, but the narrative design is praised for both sophistication, eloquence, and minimalism by a lot of people. What I mean by that is, think about Twin Peaks of games. So the game is so enigmatic that it stimulates a lot of interpretation, speculation, and actually research practices in its fandom. Now, the second thing I'm very interested in is that the game systems, how you can play the game, are in synergy with the narration or with the narrative design, let's say. So what I mean by that is that when you see something in the game, it has a logic in the lore or in the story behind that. Very rarely you see something just for the game purposes, some sort of an obstacle that doesn't make sense. So that's something that left a huge impact in the practice of creating games. Now, I have something in the bottom. Maybe leave that for the discussion. Now, I have two last questions I want to share with you. Why am I doing this? I leave that for the end, if there will be time. But how am I actually trying to research that, what it is a life cycle, how it changes, does it have some patterns? Is there something that we can, is there something that I can research that can be useful? So how I'm trying to research it. Now there are objects. So we have audience, we have, sorry for the interruptions. We have audience, we have developers, we have games, and we have paratexts. And it's a lot of things to let sink in, or a lot of things to observe and explore. So there are some methods for me to help work with that material. Now the methods are from the easiest one, or easiest for me. It's a game design analysis, which means, so how does the actual game, how it is structured, how it is played. The game design analysis takes a lot of time, and it requires the researcher to describe these systems in at least somehow graphical sense. So it takes a lot of time. So I do play games, even though it's not that fun as you play it without the research goal. And this is how some of these nodes of the games play. How these nodes in the end, how they look like. I will not go through detail, but you can spot that there's Castlevania, which is actually one of the early game that you can link to the Dark Souls, which is the case study of my thesis from game design perspective. And there are some objects or things that you can describe during game design analysis. But that's just for the games, for the case study. More interestingly, or what is unknown to me, is discourse analysis and online ethnography, which means if I'm interested in a game lifecycle, and one of these hypotheses is that a fandom or an audience makes a huge impact on how long the game is alive, I need to go to the field of text and to possibly even some meetings and meet the people. And I need to try to answer the question why they are doing that, or what it is actually they are doing, and how it all is happening that they are investing so much time and labor into nurturing the game, and they actually have no value from that. They have no cash from that, no money from that labor, but they have a lot of value. They get a lot of value. And that's something Jenkins media theory, Henry Jenkins media theory, and audience studies. So there are some pillars that I can stand on. Now, in the end, I think I'm quite ambitious, which I say with a negative connotations, because I have a feeling that my supervisor is telling me that's not the case, or that's not the wise thing to do. And I'm grateful for that. So I have the ambition that from all of these, I can research something that is general. And I know that's the main problem of the thesis, but I have a feeling that it can be made. So in the end, I would like to try to research and describe a new theory of digital game life cycles. And if that will not succeed, at least I will need to define few new terms or find different terms already established that I can use for describing this phenomena. Potentially new typology of game life cycles, which means there are certain characteristics in games, in budget, in marketing, in how you work with the fandom, that you can see a certain pattern and take a guess how the game will be, how long it will be alive. That's basically it. And there are some objections that we can maybe go through, but I tried to be my own devil's advocate. So the time rang, so I will end here. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm looking forward to a jolly cooperation with you all. Thank you.